All right, folks. So here's a little story of the little warlord that could, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, as he continues his press tour, not only to endorse Kamala Harris just out of the blue, because, why not? A foreign leader just drops in the United States and decides who they want for president. That's not a coincidence. But also has made some statements about Canada and the United States and their ever-loving support for endless war. And here's a bit of the story for you. So this is from Volodymyr Zelensky's own Twitter account, where he says, "I had a meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau." Excuse me. Where we discussed the implementation of the peace formula, military support for Ukraine, the situation on the battlefield, and the needs of a strong defenders. We deeply appreciate Canada's military and humanitarian assistance, as well as the efforts to bring some Ukrainian children deported by Russia. I am so grateful for the standing with us in the times of war and are continuing to be with us after our victory. We'll get you again, Mr. Bond. So, of course, everyone knows Justin Trudeau, our now war-loving president, or war-loving prime minister here in Canada, that we're supposed to be a peacekeeping nation. We're supposed to be détente. We're supposed to be, everything that I thought being a Canadian was. Apparently it gets diminished by this ghoul, by Justin Trudeau, nefariously, to the point of censoring people here in Canada that are calling otherwise, that are silencing people, arresting people, and being massively corrupted to scream at Canadians' face that, hey, you have to support Ukraine, even if that means you can't afford groceries. Even if it means you cannot at all have any means of financial safety and security in this nation. Even if you have to give up everything and the Canadian dream, we have to do this so Russia doesn't win. And you can't really understand this war because we silenced out the actual conflict of this war, which we have discussed endlessly about. If you want to know and understand why this war is taking effect, go look as far back as 2014. Go look at Victoria Nuland's record. Go look at Jake Sullivan. Go look at Antony Blinken. Go look at the coup in 2014 that allowed Zelenskyy to become the president of Ukraine. And just how nefarious this setup really is. And look at the fact that Canada, that supposedly is supporting, Jewish people by sending money to Israel for that conflict and war, has been notoriously known to aid alongside Nazis that have murdered and killed Jewish civilians. So it's just a big, giant cluster F of warmongering, bloodthirsty creances that are just doing anything they can for continuous war so they continue to flourish the bank accounts of the investors of war. And that's the whole point of it. Just like as Julian Assange reminds us, the whole point of this is continuous war, not to have conflict resolution, not to have peace negotiations, none of that. They just want to continue war as much as possible so that they keep buying munitions, they keep buying from military contractors, and they brainwash us and manipulate us to kill each other. So that's just Canada. But here's where this gets really more interesting, is when all of a sudden Volodymyr Zelenskyy was invited to Pennsylvania. Now, why exactly Pennsylvania? Why exactly this one particular state that they invite a foreign leader from all the way across the world on a private jet, on an Air Force jet, to come all the way to Pennsylvania? Is it because they enjoy Hershey, Pennsylvania? They want to explore the chocolate factory? Or maybe it's because Pennsylvania has a huge military manufacturing plant. And like good warlords, you want to check out to see how much bombs they're making and make sure there's enough to kill as many as people as they wish, according to Zelenskyy. So Governor Josh Shapiro, that's the governor of Pennsylvania, welcomes Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to Scranton Army ammunition plant, signed sister state agreement with Zarazifia, Ukraine, to strengthen ties. And it's not because they share a cultural path. I love when people say that we got to support these people because they're our allies, but they don't have a definition on what exactly makes us allies. Is it because we share common interest? Is it because, we share cultural ties, food? Like, what exactly makes us an ally? Oh, it's because the transfer of money. Because we can slush fund a bunch of military equipment, get them to slaughter as many people as possible, and then we get some of the profit. But we don't see a dime. We're screwed over, just like the rest of the world, because we're ruled by a bunch of bloodthirsty killers. So here is Revolutionary Blackout Network to sum this up for you on Josh Shapiro introducing Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the little warlord that could, the James Bond villain, to Pennsylvania to check out some of the ammunition that's now being sent to Ukraine. Listen to this.
Governor Josh Shapiro meets with Zelenskyy in Pennsylvania in order to push endless war against Russia. Josh Shapiro is so bloodthirsty, here he is signing missiles that is meant to be used against Russians. Why do Americans tolerate these psychopaths who care way more about waging war than actually providing for the American people? And what is up with the ruling class obsession with signing bombs? Our ruling class is a genocidal death cult. We also had Nikki Haley doing the same thing as she was signing bombs that Israel used.
Now, in their defense, I should say that these are very wholesome Christian bombs. Eventually, these missiles are going to rain down onto territories that have nothing to do with us in poor fishing villages across the world. And I'm sure they, pop up, giant mechanical arms so they can hug people, right? That's what missiles do, right? Oh, they explode. Oh, they cause radiation. Oh, they cause people to burst into flames and kill off any of the surrounding area. Oh, yeah. I guess it's kind of worthless to sign a missile that no one's going to see after it implodes onto these fishing villages and kill millions of civilians. But it's fun, right? Nikki Haley's enjoying herself. Josh Shapiro, look at me. I get to sign an autograph. Woo! I get to sign more papers to sell out the entire state of Pennsylvania to a war-loved nation. To the most corrupted country in Eastern Europe. Yay! We're selling our munitions to a bunch of neo-Nazis. Yay, business. Because that's their defense. Honest to God, that's their defense. They're just going to go right to, well, it's business. And you're about to see how, again, I'm going to show this later on in this video, that it all just comes down to lucrative bloodthirst business. That's why they do these wars. That's why they have to brainwash men, because it destroys the business. It destroys the art of preemptive war. It destroys the military-industrial complex, which we were warned about in the early 60s, that now we are dealing with at an effervescent rate to the point of nuclear annihilation. Because we're farther at the brink of nuclear war than we were in the 50s during the Red Scare. What does that tell you?
To murder children. We also had John Fetterman and the entire Washington swamp that were cheering on Israeli terrorism as they indiscriminately target civilians with their pager attack.
And I want to be very clear. I thought what Israel chose to do about blowing up the pagers and then walkie-talkies, and then after targeting and eliminating membership and leadership of Hezbollah, I absolutely support that. And in fact, if anything, I love it.
They self-defense what Israel did with the pagers and how the walkie-talkies? They killed an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old.
You know, the same Israeli...
Yeah, I love it. You know why? Because I don't have to deal with it. You ever notice that? You ever notice that, the people that love the war most are the same chicken shit cowards that will never actually fight a war themselves? I don't see John Fetterman putting his bootstraps down and lacing himself up to be on the front ends of war. Not that I don't think he should because of his capabilities. I mean, the man can barely govern himself. I don't think he should be capable of being in control of defending another nation, but this is what they do because they're a bunch of sellouts. They're a bunch of, complete oligarchs that don't care about people. They just care about flourishing themselves. They're a bunch of narcissists. And whether it being AIPAC lobbies of Israel or Ukraine lobby groups or BlackRock that wants endless war or the WEF or the bunch of the globalist tirades that profit off this, they're just going to continue this as much as possible. And they want to silence out narratives. They want to silence out people from understanding war and understanding where war comes from so we can actually have a resolution. That's why they want no context allowed. They don't want people to know. They just want people to understand that this guy's evil. He did this, so go kill. That's all they want you to know. Not how this war came about, why Russia's retaliating, why in the case of Israel, why Hezbollah came to be, why all these terrorist groups we know by name, but we don't know where they came from. They never will ever tell you that because these are the people responsible for investing and creating these terrorist ploys because they need endless war to flourish.
Terrorism and the genocide that Josh Shapiro supports. Meanwhile, Josh Shapiro claims that peace in the Middle East is not possible because Palestinians are too battle-minded. So, the person who is signing bombs and supporting the indiscriminate slaughter of civilians wants you to believe that the Palestinians are the ones who are battle-minded. Meanwhile, according to the Washington establishment, we're anti-Semitic if we don't like this scumbag.
So that was Revolutionary Blackout Network really summing that up in great detail of just how sickening that is. And here is another guy, Joey Manarino, saying Zelenskyy just essentially endorsed Kamala in Pennsylvania while with Josh Shapiro autographing ammunition. He called Trump and Vance radical. He also said Trump has no idea how to end the war, how this is not some sort of violation from a man who we are funding. So, and you remember, and I don't have the clip on here, unfortunately, Zelenskyy actually met with Trump. And Trump said we were going to come to a conclusion. We're going to come to some sort of agreement. And regardless of how you feel about Trump, I give him the credit of actually being one of the very few politicians I've ever heard, whether being Canadian or American, to say that we need to come to some sort of agreement, that we need to have some sort of resolution. We need to have some sort of diplomacy. Does he have the answer to that? Probably not. But at least he's willing to acknowledge that, as opposed to a man who is signing autographs to a bunch of bombs that are going to blow the parts off of little babies. Who is going to, those bombs are going to annihilate schools and hospitals and apartment buildings and residential areas. The general public that suffers and gets sacrificed in these wars that they have no control of. They have no say, they have no control, because the people that enact these wars are motherfuckers like him. Are people like Josh Shapiro and Zelenskyy and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. That's why Zelenskyy is going to Pennsylvania to endorse Kamala. Not because she has good policies, not because she cares about America, but because he knows that with Kamala, he's still going to be on top. As opposed to someone like Trump, who got indicted for not sending enough ammunition to this corrupt country. That was one of the indictments, that was going to put a halt or a pause on sending military equipment to Ukraine to advance warfare to Russia. And they indict him on that, saying that was too crazy of him. That's going towards Putin too much. And they call Trump and Vance radical. But this is why they call him radical. As Rand Paul described back in the day, this was back in, I think, 2016 or 2015, when Rand Paul, son of Ron Paul, wanted to stop the sale of ammunition to Saudi Arabia. Because Saudi Arabia, a well-known theocratic dictatorship that cuts off the heads of people, including killing her own journalists with a bone saw, they still want to send ammunition and weapons over there and create a partnership because of business. Even Donald Trump said that. Donald Trump caved to that. Well, aren't you worried about the journalist that was killed by a foreign nation? Well, we got business to do. And here's exactly, CNN is going to explain this to Rand Paul.
We've given him no authority to get involved in the civil war in Yemen. And we have to ask the bigger question, is this making it better or worse? Are there more refugees or less refugees? Is there more chaos or less chaos with Saudi Arabia bombing into Yemen? So, yeah, it's a debate we ought to have, and no president should unilaterally have this authority without the approval of Congress.
So Rand Paul is definitely on the point of that we should be accountable to these decisions of going into war. Like, what benefits are going to do to advance warfare into Syria? What benefits are going to do to turn Libya into a failed state, one of the richest nations of North Africa, turn it on its side and make it into a sex slave terrorist cult? What is that going to do for America? What benefit is that going to do? And he's definitely on point about this. But watch how CNN is going to double down this and try to scold Rand Paul because the business motive of war. Listen to this. And that's why CNN gets involved in war.
So for you, this is a moral issue because, you know, there's a lot of jobs at stake. Certainly, if a lot of these defense contractors stop selling warplanes, other sophisticated equipment to Saudi Arabia, there's going to be a significant loss of jobs and revenue here in the United States.
Yeah, I get you have moral issues and there's a lot to be, but what about the jobs? Wolf Blitzer, what about the jobs? What about those poor, hungry defense contractors? I bet they're down to their last billion right now, and they're just starving for another war. Do you not care about them? Do you not care about them and their sacrifices as they sit in their multi-million-dollar mansions while poor people are overseas dying for their endless wars? Don't you feel bad for them? And he's trying to make it sound like it's like the most awful thing. Well, if we don't do that, then lots of jobs are at stake, and it's going to affect the economy. Don't you care about that, Rand Paul? You and your morals. You and your damn morals. Being non-interventionist. Come on, we have to invade. We have to blow the heads off each other. Killing is the best business we got. And sadly, to quote the words of the late George Carlin, because every time I see that, it reminds me of the joke they makes about, you know, you can't make a VCR worth of shit. You can't make cars. We can't, you know, grow food properly. We can't do anything, really, in the interest of people. But the one thing we can do, the one thing we still can do, is bomb the shit of a lesser nation. That is the one thing we are proud to still do. We can throw bombs to the brownest and blackest nations around the world, and no one's the wiser. And that is sad. That is devastating. That is absolutely heartbreaking. And, you know, all Wolf Blitzer cares about is, well, you know, the defense contractors, you know, the people that advertise this network. And that's why we're such a pro-war network. Instead of actually doing journalism to describe exactly the perils of war, the perishness of individuals that have sacrificed and how war really is. It is detrimental. It is devastating. They're never going to tell you that. They're never going to tell you any of that or any prevention of war. They're just going to tell you to deal with it. Look at these bombs that are going off. Look at how cutesy they are. Where's Brian Williams to say he, creamed his jeans singing a Leonard Cohen song as the missile was taking off? So magical, so beautiful. Imagine how many limbs are going to blow off. Ugh. That's because they live in a moralist society run by maniacs, bloodthirsty maniacs that don't understand the consequences of war. And, it's amazing that people will bend themselves backwards in the most stupidest way to defend these wars in the most outrageous possible. The same people that used to cry out about Iraq and Afghanistan, they are now, bending themselves backwards because we don't want to, you don't want to deal with Russia. We don't want to shake hands with the wrong people. Well, who are the wrong people? The people that tell us are the wrong people. And they bend themselves backwards, but yet don't understand how we got to this concept, how we got to wars, how we continuously get into these wars. They don't understand. And they don't want to understand because they're too busy listening to CNN, MSNBC, and the mainstream legacy media that's brought to you by the military-industrial complex that is promoting this war as a business. This is advertising for them. Anytime you turn on the TV and see war, it's advertising to send more munitions to these countries, to advance warfare, to make sure that these two countries that have nothing to do with us get manipulated enough, get angry enough, that they go and fight each other, and then those same bloodthirsty killers that tell us that we need to go to war can laugh themselves to the bank with blood on their hands. And that's why we're still doing this to this day, even though many people know that this war is unwinnable, that Ukraine's pretty much destroyed and continuously still destroyed. And after everything we have uncovered, after all the devastation that's happening here because of all of our money going towards these wars, they're still doing it. They're still doing it. They'll still sign a paycheck, a blank paycheck off to Ukraine without any question, but no measure on fixing homelessness, no measure on infrastructure, no measure on healthcare, no measure on education. None of that. They'll let you starve on the street, you, a tax-paying citizen, so that they can continuously play war games. That is what's sickening about this.